Second part. Pick madly fought to control his breathing. Inhaling as much as he could, he filled his lungs and belly, holding it in a short time before slowly letting it out again. The elderly actor from the East who taught him how to do that guaranteed that doing it twice would be enough to calm down even the most ragged breathing. Once sufficed. His nose was assaulted by the stench of putrefying flesh, mixed with something that smelled like sulfur. Proof that something there ate and excreted. And there was light. It trickled in from somewhere, as demonstrated by the way they went to the surface to capture other creatures. The dust creepers weren't like earth bugs or stone snakes, both of which operated wholly underground, and the dust creepers' sense of sight required light. About 20 yards ahead, a number of what appeared to be dust creepers were wriggling around. Their size was quite different from the one earlier. What? Kids? Ice water ran down the boy's spine. That dust creeper had been searching for food for its young. A net might already be. Suddenly a scream rang out. The startled bugs backed away. They'd never heard a human scream before. Joy flooded Pick's heart. That was Annette's voice. She was still alive. At the same time, he had to groan. "You idiot. Don't make any noise." The cries of their prey only stimulated the violent nature of predators. Looking around to either side, Pick grabbed a rock that would just fit in his fist. "There you go," he said, throwing it on the other side of the bugs without taking particular aim. The reaction was unexpected. At the sound of the impact, the bugs turned in unison to face Pick. Oh shit. A stubby one was barreling toward him with terrible speed. Ah! Letting out his breath and keenly focusing himself with the same cry, the boy braced the rifle against his shoulder. He had experience with several sort of guns, but this time it went quite differently. A kick several times as strong as he expected slammed the butt into his shoulder, and the barrel jumped up. He managed to hold it down to 45 degrees. Through the flame and purplish smoke, he saw the dust creeper crumple forward, and there was a small hole through its elliptical carapace. Holy! They swarmed toward him. At first he thought there were perhaps 5 or 6 dust creepers, but now there were 10, 20, no, 50 of them. Pick made a snap judgment. Discarding the long gun, he grabbed the submachine gun hanging around his neck and squeezed the trigger. He also had experience with this. Vibrations jogged his elbow, and there was a pleasing staccato of gunfire as he lightly swept the barrel from side to side. The vanguard fell. Those behind them tripped over the fallen and followed suit, at which point the submachine gun riddled them with bullets. And as the last one fell, the gun ran out of ammo. I did it. And after making sure none of the bugs were still moving, he called out loudly, "It's me. Are you okay?" "You? Is that you, Pick? I'm so glad you're here," Annette said, her tone the complete opposite of its usual. "Can you make it over here? There's a way out. I'm on my way." Due to the heaped dust creeper corpses, he couldn't see over to the other side. Still, he could hear her footsteps and sense the girl's presence. Finally, he thought, relief flooded through every inch of him. At that very moment, a sharp cry escaped the girl, and Pick knew the cause. From beyond the remains, An enormous arthropod riddled with holes and streaming greenish ichor leapt up to menace Pick. But even as the boy slipped into despair, he didn't give up. His every move was out of reflex. When one of the legs in the foremost pair touched him, his fingers became steel, and power coursed through his body. The Dust Creeper's movements carried it in a corkscrew around the boy's body, and when it reached the top, the bug was released. That nearly 10-foot-long body being thrown 30 feet was quite a sight to see. The instant it hit the ground, there was the sound of eggshells shattering. Worse than that were the grating squeals of agony that made the boy grimace as he shouted, "Little lady, where are you?" From behind the remains of the creeper young, he heard a helpless-sounding voice. "Come on," he shouted. "But I don't want to. These bodies are covered in blood. It's disgusting. Damn, this girl's a lot of trouble." Pick went over to the mound of corpses. Regardless of the fact that some of them were still twitching, he kicked them aside, rolled them away, and finally saw Ned standing there stock still. Just as Pick spotted the girl, her legs buckled under her, making her sit, but the boy raced over and pulled her up again. Suddenly Ned shuddered and escaped the boy's grip. "What's your problem?" "Don't touch me. You're filthy." "Huh." On closer inspection, Pick saw that he was covered from head to toe with sweat, dirt, and gore from the Dust Creepers. Apparently their blood had splattered over him as he laid waste to them with the submachine gun. "Don't get hung up on a little thing like that. I can't help that I'm filthy. After all, I came down into a Dust Creeper den to rescue you." Thoroughly perplexed, eyes fixed on Pick. She was still terrified. "Okay. Seeing as how you almost ended up a meal, I suppose it's understandable." "Don't call me a meal," Annette said, doubling over and starting to cry. Looking up toward the heavens, Pick said, "At any rate, if we don't get out of here fast, there's no saying another Dust Creeper won't come by. Okay, on your feet now, come on." No matter what encouragement he offered, Annette only sobbed. The shock had been so great it had ruined her mental equilibrium. Ordinarily, he'd have knocked her unconscious and carried her out. But for some reason, Pick couldn't bring himself to do it. Looking down at the weeping girl with her lost expression, he found himself also standing there like stone. It wasn't through any effort of theirs that the situation changed. From the depths of the den, more high-pitched screeches were heard. "Oh yeah, Dust Creeper dens aren't always alone," Pick remarked, horror chilling his blood as he recalled the particulars. Old Man Hammond used to say that sometimes they were connected to the dens of other Dust Creepers, and the others have come back. Suddenly Annette shot up like she was spring-loaded, saying, "Let's get out of here. They're coming." "Hurry up and go. We'll take the tunnel back." After shouting that, Pick let out a despairing groan. There was no way Annette would be able to crawl up that slope. Nevertheless, there was only one thing he could say. "There's a hole over there, go." Annette started running. She trampled her way across the bug remains without any qualms. She didn't even look back for Pick. "That figures," he said with a wry smile. "I'll do what I can. The rest is down to luck." He started to reach for the trigger of the submachine gun, and then remembered it was out of ammo. The other clips, he'd forgotten to bring them. There hadn't been anything on his mind except saving Annette. Shit. Pick spat, tossing away the submachine gun and getting a tight grip on the rifle. He didn't know how many shots he had left. All he could do was pray he had more bullets than the number of new dust creepers. They came, wriggling to and fro. They crawled along. Pick closed his eyes. Though he tried to remember a prayer he'd learned at school, he didn't fare well. At least let the girl get away. When they were 35 to 40 feet away, he fired the rifle. 3 or 4 of them pitched forward in rapid succession. Above the next shot, the hammer fell with an empty clack. Out of bullets. The dust creepers were over the corpses and closing on him. Son of a... Pick snarled, taking a tight grip on the barrel of his rifle. Though the hot steel burned his skin, he didn't even notice. He had to buy Annette enough time to escape, though he didn't know whether or not she'd get away. He was willing to give his life so she could at least try. A gray mass filled his field of view, and then suddenly it sank. Another mass had piled on top of it. The instant he realized it was the ceiling, Pick leapt back. Though the rumbling of the ground told him it was a cave-in, the swirling clouds of dust kept him from seeing what fell, and gauging the extent of the collapse. This was no mere cave-in. A tremendously heavy object had fallen in. Before the cloud of dust had settled, Pick heard a man's voice say, "Ah, I didn't know there was a dust creeper den around here. It would appear we'll need quite some time to extricate ourselves from this." Another man said, "Why, with all the Iron Castle's horsepower, we'll be out in no time. Okay, back in your seat." "Wait, in addition to the dust creepers, I smell a human," said the first voice. "Now that you mention it, there's a woman as well. Both young, at least, judging by the sound of their blood." Pick was frozen from head to toe. Those guys, they're nobles. But if they can only move by night, we might still have enough of a lead on them. When and how did they ever catch up? By this point, the wild swirls of thick dust had subsided, and through the thinning veil of ochre several figures in enormous black shape began to come into focus. There was a man with a hooked nose and dazzling finery wholly unsuited to this place. Across from him was a figure of long hair wearing a threadbare cape and well-worn robes, and finally there was someone with a pair of crossed swords on his back. When their hazy shapes began to take clearer form, and two gleams the color of blood graced the face of each, it came as no surprise that blood-chilling terror came over Pick, and he ran for the sloping exit tunnel without a backward glance. Annette was standing in front of the hole, looking utterly lost. Pointing up at it, she cried, "I can't climb up to the hole." "You've got to. Nobles are coming." She was so scared she froze solid. "Okay, get going," the boy said, giving her a shove, but still she showed no signs of moving. 3 figures were approaching. The pair was cornered in the most literal sense. Oh, shit. As he braced the rifle butt against his shoulder, a rather disturbing laugh crept into his ear. Due to that, Pick didn't notice the sound of a silver cylinder rolling over to the nobleman's feet. "Shut your eyes," said a voice that sounded muffled, so the nobles wouldn't hear it. A split second before Pick's eyelids closed completely, a dazzling light burst forth in all directions. Second part end.